Marine bully targeted the new girl at lunch. Minutes later, his career was destroyed. A true story. Nobody really pays attention to what happens at lunch. People eat, talk, scroll their phones, and go back to work. It is one of the most ordinary parts of any day. But on a Tuesday afternoon inside a military mess hall at Camp Pendleton, California, one lunch break became the moment that ended a man's entire career. And it all happened fast. Faster than anyone in that room could have expected. Private First Class Reyes had only been at her first duty station for 3 weeks. 3 weeks is nothing in the military. You are still figuring out where everything is. You are still learning people's names. You are still trying to understand how things work in your new unit, what the unspoken rules are, who you can talk to, who you stay away from. She was doing all of that, quietly, without making noise or causing trouble. She had joined the Marines because she believed in something. She wanted to serve. She wanted to be part of something bigger than herself, something that stood for discipline and values, and doing the hard thing. So far, she had kept her head down, done exactly what was asked of her, and stayed out of everyone's way. That Tuesday, she went through the lunch line like everyone else. She picked up her tray, got her food, and looked around the mess hall for somewhere to sit. The place was full and loud, the way it always is at that hour. Trays clattering, conversations overlapping, the smell of food filling the whole room. She spotted an open seat near the window, a little away from the bigger, louder groups. She was not trying to avoid people. She just did not know many of them yet. Being new is uncomfortable. There is no getting around that. Sometimes you just want to eat your lunch without having to figure out where you fit in. She sat down, settled her tray in front of her, and started eating. That is when Sergeant Holloway walked over. Sergeant Holloway was not someone new to that base. He had been in the Marines for years and had built up rank and a certain kind of reputation along the way. He was the kind of person who had gotten very comfortable with the fact that people listened when he spoke, moved when he walked, and kept quiet when he wanted quiet. Rank does that to some people. Most handle it fine. A few start to think it means something that it was never supposed to mean, that it makes them untouchable, that it places them above the same standards everyone else has to meet. Sergeant Holloway had gotten there. You could tell by what he did next. He walked over to where Private First Class Reyes was sitting, and he started talking. He did not do it quietly. He made sure that the other Marines nearby, mostly junior ones, could hear him. He was very deliberate about the audience. The things he said had nothing to do with her duties, or her work, or her performance. Nothing was about how she was doing her job, or what she needed to improve. The comments were personal. They were designed to humiliate. He talked about her in a way that suggested she did not quite belong there, like she was somehow less than the others around her. It was the kind of behavior that only makes sense when the person doing it has an audience and wants to feel big in front of them. He had both of those things. Private First Class Reyes did not say a word back. She sat there, and she looked at him. No tears, no panic, no attempt to argue or defend herself or smooth things over. Just stillness. Complete, steady stillness. The kind that is actually harder to hold on to than most people realize, especially when you are new and young, and the person talking down to you has rank and a room full of people watching. She did not give him the reaction he was clearly looking for. She kept her posture straight. She did not look away. She did not apologize for something she had not done. She just sat there in front of her lunch tray and let him finish saying what he was going to say. People who were in that mess hall that day later described how the room had gone quieter than usual. That specific kind of quiet, where everyone can tell something wrong is happening, but no one knows what to do about it. Most people did what most people do in those situations. They kept their eyes down. They waited for it to be over. One person did not. Staff Sergeant Torres had been sitting 3 tables away, eating his own lunch. He had heard every word. He was the kind of person people in his unit described as fair, someone who took his responsibilities seriously and did not look for shortcuts when it came to doing the right thing. He had been in long enough to know exactly what he was watching, and he had not spent all those years in the military building a reputation for integrity just to sit still while someone threw it in the trash right in front of him. He put his fork down. He stood up. He walked across the mess hall. Not quickly, not in a way that was dramatic or meant to draw extra attention. Just walked over, steady and calm. He stopped near Sergeant Holloway, and he spoke to him directly, in front of the same people Holloway had made sure were watching. He told him clearly what he had just witnessed. He told him the behavior was not acceptable. He told him the way he had spoken to Private First Class Reyes was a serious problem. And then he said something that Sergeant Holloway clearly had not seen coming, that he was going to put all of it in writing. Sergeant Holloway left the mess hall. Staff Sergeant Torres walked back to his table and finished eating his lunch. By the end of that lunch hour, Staff Sergeant Torres had submitted a formal written account of the incident. He wrote down what happened, what was said, and the exact time it occurred. He was specific. He was thorough. He named himself as a witness, and he meant it. 2 other Marines who had been in that room came forward separately and put their own accounts in writing. They had seen the same thing. They described it the same way. 3 separate witnesses, 3 separate written statements, all of them pointing at the same incident, all of them telling the same story, because there was only one story to tell. The report reached Major Graves within the hour. Major Graves was the commanding officer, and she ran her unit tightly. She read the incident report once, then she read it again, then she opened a formal investigation. The military does not drag its feet when evidence is clear, and multiple credible witnesses have already put their names on paper. There was no ambiguity here, no confusion about what had happened, no question of one person's word against another. The record was detailed, and it was solid, and it pointed in one direction, without any room for debate. The investigation moved quickly, and it was thorough. What Sergeant Holloway had done was found to be in violation of military conduct standards and base equal opportunity directives. The findings came back in writing, formal and final, the way these things always do in the military. He was reduced in rank. His re-enlistment recommendation, the document that tells the military you are someone worth keeping, was officially withdrawn. A review of his security clearance was opened. Within 14 months of that ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Sergeant Holloway was out of the military entirely. Years of service, gone. A rank he had spent years earning, gone. A career that had survived deployments and evaluations and everything the military had thrown at him over the years, finished. All of it because one afternoon, he walked across a mess hall and chose to be cruel to someone who was eating lunch. The part that gets people when they hear this story is the timing, not the investigation, but the pivot point itself. Sergeant Holloway walked away from that mess hall, thinking it would pass. That is the thing about people who have gotten away with behavior like this before. They develop a kind of confidence about it. They start to believe that their rank, or their history, or the general tendency of people to look away, will keep protecting them. He had no reason to think Tuesday was going to be any different from all the other times. But Staff Sergeant Torres had seen him, and Staff Sergeant Torres was not the looking away kind. Private First Class Reyes went on and completed her service. She did not have to write a single report about what had happened to her. She did not have to fight for herself in a room full of people who outranked her. She sat quietly in a mess hall, held herself together without flinching, and trusted that the system would work the way it was supposed to. It did, because one man with rank and a conscience decided that finishing his lunch was going to have to wait. That is honestly the part of this story that deserves the most attention. It would have been so easy for Staff Sergeant Torres to stay in his seat. It was not his conflict. Sergeant Holloway was not his problem to manage. He was just a man eating lunch who happened to be sitting 3 tables away when something wrong was happening in his line of sight. He could have looked down at his plate. He could have told himself it was not his place. He could have reasoned that getting involved was risky, that Holloway had rank, that writing a formal report would make things complicated. He could have done all of that and quietly finished eating and gone back to work and never said a word. Most people in that room probably did exactly that. It is not hard to understand why. Getting involved is uncomfortable. It can create enemies. It can complicate your own life in ways that have nothing to do with you. But he stood up anyway. And because he stood up, and because he put what he saw into a written record, a young woman who had done nothing wrong and had not said a word in her own defense still got justice. The cruelty did not pass. The incident did not disappear into the noise of a busy Tuesday. It became a documented fact with names and dates and corroborating accounts. And it had real consequences for the person who thought there would not be any. The military has rules for a reason. Rank is meant to create structure and accountability, not to give certain people a pass on the same standards everyone else has to meet. Sergeant Holloway had spent years operating as though his rank exempted him from that. He was wrong. An ordinary lunch in an ordinary mess hall showed him exactly how wrong he was. because one person in that room decided that what he had just watched was not something he was willing to leave alone. The room went quiet. A fork was set down. A man stood up from his table. A form was filled out before the end of the day, and a career that had taken years to build was over by the time the paperwork finished moving. Sometimes justice does not look the way people expect it to. It does not always arrive in a dramatic moment or a loud confrontation. Sometimes it looks like a staff sergeant calmly walking across a room, saying what needed to be said, and then going back to finish his lunch. Sometimes it is just a person deciding that looking away is not something they are willing to do. That was enough. It turned out that was exactly enough.